Looking back at last week, how big of a win was that for you guys? You and San Diego were two of the hottest teams in the league.
I think it's a huge win for our playoff hopes, for the thought of a home playoff game. um, it was huge for us, and I think too, a lot of the time, the standings this year are so tight. It comes down to a head-to-head at the end of the year. So for us to have that win, one in the win column, but two against a team like San Diego who are battling it out for, it's really big for us. So it's a step in the right direction for sure.
Personally, last week you got to 110 points. You've done that 3 times in your career. You're now one of 4 guys in league history that have done that. And I know guys don't really look at their individual accolades, but what does that say about how you performed over the last couple of years, that you're among a very select group of guys in that category?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, humbling for sure. I think for me personally, obviously we're still in the season here making, our goal is to win a championship. So I feel like once the season kind of ends, that's when you kind of sit and reflect on, individually how you did this season, what you want to improve on, stuff like that. But, just thinking about it quickly now, I think, it's what you work for, right? Is to go out there and to be the best version of yourself, and you want to be the best, right? So for me, I pride myself on that. My work ethic in the off season, when I'm on the floor, it all adds up. So I think it's a big credit though to the guys around me, because they're really, we're one unit out there, and I don't just say that, I mean it. I think we all work together really well. I just find myself in some open spots. I say luckily, but it's not really luckily, because it's those guys around me, opening things up and, hitting their shots, making their feeds. I'm the beneficiary sometimes.
The other guys on the team, certainly on your side, McConvey in year 2, he had a great rookie year. What have you seen? How have you seen his game develop so far this year?
It's awesome. I mean, I think the world of him as a person, as a player. I think he had a great first season. So when you say that, right, he took a big step. You really think about that. That's a big deal, because he had a really good first year. He's a really good player, but I think he took a huge step this year too in terms of, I think he came in like a little bit bigger, faster. I think he's hitting a lot of shots. He's creating a lot with the ball, without the ball. He's, out there moving bodies. And he's the ultimate team guy. He's the definition of putting the team first. And I think, he doesn't get enough credit. So, I think for him, I think the sky's the limit. I think he's as good as it gets. So I'm happy he's on our side, and I feel lucky to be able to work with him.
Graydon also on your side, he's a rookie, especially in the last month. He has really been able to get a lot more time. What have you seen from him as his minutes have increased?
I just see, a really good player, who's getting more confident in this league. I've watched him in college with him going to Albany, obviously. I still watch their games and whatnot. So just watching him through his years at Albany, I've always thought he's a really good player. And when we drafted him, I was excited to, get a chance to play with him, because, I've admired his game from afar. So, I think he's definitely getting more confident out there. He's getting, sorry, Sis is calling me. He's getting more confident out there. He's really creating a lot with, I think the play that really defines him too, I would say, is that play he had last game where he picked up the loose ball one hand. He just wrapped it around a guy while getting hit. It wasn't just a guy. It was Rubish, who's one of the better defenders in the league too. So that's him in a nutshell, I feel like. And I think just like T-Mac, the sky's the limit for Hogger. He's great with the ball. He's great without the ball, just like T-Mac, and they always put the team first. So their futures are bright.
Putting Sisselberger to voicemail, looking at his game, particularly last week going against Baptiste, who's one of the best around. How big was that, especially in that second half when the game got really tight, that he was able to make those adjustments and start getting almost 50-50 on faceoffs?
I feel, feel lucky to have Sis on the team. I've played with him in outdoor for a couple of years now, and know how good of a player he is and how much he can impact the game. I've seen it firsthand, and it's awesome to have a guy like that on your side who you could count on in those big moments, and who, when the pressure's at its peak, that's when he performs his best. I feel like, I've seen that for years now, and, I was hoping we were going to be able to get him playing. I knew he was battling a couple injuries earlier in the season, so it was just a moment of when. But I knew once we got him in the lineup, he was going to be a huge boost, and I think you've seen it as of late. We're on this winning streak now, and I think he's been a big part of it. So he's putting a team first type of guy. He practiced what he preaches, right? You see him working through the week, all week. His shoot around, he's working at his craft, and I think that's why he's one of the best because his work ethic. So we're lucky to have him.
Game against Ottawa. This is a team that you beat up in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago, and they're playing really well as well. What are the things you guys got to take advantage tonight to keep this win streak going?
I think for us, it's not necessarily about the team we're going against, and I said this last week too about San Diego. San Diego's a great team, Ottawa's a great team. Every team in this league is a great team, right? And that's why I think this league's so hard to win in, is because it doesn't matter if you're top of the standings or bottom of the standings. Anyone could beat anyone on any night. It's just who shows up that night, right? So for us, it's focusing on ourselves and really making sure we go out there with energy. I feel like our starts have been good these past couple games, and it's been a huge part of our success. So from the first whistle, right, going out there, banging bodies out there, getting through the middle hard, and just making sure we're out there creating space for each other, but not letting them be comfortable in their game plan that they have coming in against us. So I think we're just going to continue to do what we've been doing and focus on us, and let the result happen as it will. But I think if we do that, we'll be all right.